Hi, this is a content warning. Today's episode deals with tough topics, including trauma and addiction. Please listen with care. Welcome to Beyond Equity, the Courage to Care from ONA, the Ontario Nurses Association. This podcast is all about hearing stories about work and life from each other through a lens of anti-racism and anti-oppression. If you work in healthcare, and especially if you're a member of ONA, this podcast is for you. Today, we're meeting Jeremy.
I'm a public health nurse and have been working at public health for 5 years. Currently, I am in the harm reduction program in collaboration with sexual health.
We're going to start today's episode by finding out what Jeremy loves about the work he does in public health.
Ooh, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of things to like about being in public health. I think focusing on the aspect of prevention and harm reduction, as well as monitoring trends, was something that really appealed to me. I love my community, but there is quite a high population of people who are experiencing homelessness, and we do live right on the 401 corridor in between Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. So we do see a lot of drugs coming down the 401 corridor, and we have a high population of people who are experiencing homelessness here. It's definitely increased since the pandemic. I don't usually have a typical day at work, but I do usually work with people who are experiencing homelessness, who have diagnosed and undiagnosed mental health conditions, and who regularly use unregulated substances. So the drop-in location is an industrial building. There are offices. There is a nurse on site, as well as many other community partners there to provide resources to people who come in to access services. So if you walked in the front door, there's a front desk where you drop off your belongings. So you have a basket or a tote that is assigned to you, and you put your belongings in there. You have to declare any weapons, and you cannot bring any clean supply or dirty supply into the main location. By supply, I mean safer drug use supplies, so clean needles, clean pipes, that kind of thing. You have to make sure that you don't have those on you in the main location. So once you're in the main area, that is where the majority of the community partners are accessible to provide services to people who are homeless, to people who use unregulated substances, that kind of thing. And that's where we perform a lot of our sexual health related nursing interventions. So that would be nicotine replacement therapy, high risk immunizations, and some sexual health testing as well. With sexual health services and harm reduction being together, I think it's partly because a lot of our population do engage in high risk sexual behaviors. So let's say if you are a regular user of crystal meth, it's actually more likely that you will engage in risky sexual behaviors. So right now we're doing a pilot point of care test for syphilis and HIV. So basically it's like a finger prick like you would have for diabetes. And then we test your blood and we can see if you have syphilis or HIV within a minute. And the benefit of that is that we can treat you for syphilis right on the spot. We can also provide resources for HIV. It just takes a little bit more follow-up care than just treating you right on the spot. But it's very beneficial. And I think that we have, from this project, we have discovered that people who are unattached from healthcare tend to have a higher rate of a syphilis infection as well. So I think there was a vision, because we deal with similar people or similar clients, that it would make sense to join the programs together. In my role, we oversee the Safer Drug Use Distribution Program, providing people with clean supplies to use drugs safely. We monitor trends in our region. We create and foster relationships with community partners and provide training and education sessions on how to safely dispose of sharps, around stigma, using naloxone properly, and the principles of harm reduction. When I first joined the program 4 years ago, I didn't know what harm reduction was all about. And I think that looking back on it now and through my learning, I realized that what it really is trying to treat everybody with humanistic qualities. So at the end of the day, everybody is a human. I have a colleague who talks about each year of somebody's life as a chapter. So we're only seeing them in this current chapter of their life, and it might be their worst one. And I think that humanism, respect, compassion all play a huge role in harm reduction. Human rights is definitely something that is often discussed in my current role. When you deal with somebody who are using substances or who are experiencing homelessness or they have undiagnosed mental health or diagnosed mental health concerns, there's usually a lot of stigma directed at them, and it makes it really challenging for them to access the healthcare system, whether that be just like getting a family doctor's appointment or going to the hospital. They're often struggling a lot, so they need that extra support, and sometimes they will outright refuse to go, which can be frustrating for you at that time, but being able to kind of take a step back and look at the whole picture. And I feel like a lot of people in society do have that discriminational viewpoint or that stigmatizing viewpoint of people in this situation. So I think being able to support them where they are is definitely something that is not easy, but is needed for human rights, for that fair, equal, and just component that everybody is entitled to. My background is in emergency medicine and acute medicine, so I came from a hospital setting. And the ER or acute medicine really focuses on what's initially wrong or what's wrong in that moment in time. So what is happening to you now and how do we fix that one thing or that one problem? And there's a lot of pressure to make sure you get it done quickly and efficiently in the hospital system. And I think the most opening thing that I experienced was actually joining the harm reduction program to help me understand some of the experiences that people have and learning about how people are suffering through trauma. And one of the ways that they cope might be using unregulated substances, and being able to kind of take a step back, look at the whole picture, see what's happening was something that was incredibly eye-opening for me. What I instantly think of is back in school, we learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So what you need to survive. So your right to food, your right to shelter, your right to safety, those kind of things. And if you can't satisfy those ones, you can't advance to the next levels to reach your full self-actualization. So basically that just means that people don't have regular access to food. They're using meal programs within the community. They don't always have shelter or security. They have to fend for themselves. So sometimes they have weapons to protect themselves. They don't always feel safe. They think that some people might be after them, and that might be true. The police or other people in the drug trade, I'll say, are after them. So they can't even make those basic level of functioning. And that really starts to degrade. If you're hungry, if you don't have clean clothes, if you haven't showered or anything like that, it's really hard to make other choices regarding your healthcare or your income. It really puts a damper on that, and people do struggle. Something that I learned when I was in harm reduction was that it's about asking not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. So I think in my role now, I was able to ask more well, what happened to you? I was able to have more full conversations with people. And a lot of the people that are suffering from these undiagnosed mental health concerns or diagnosed mental health concerns, who are experiencing homelessness, who are using drugs, have had significant trauma in their past life. And it's been really hard on them. And you get to a point where you can see why they wanted or how they started to use drugs as well. I was talking to a client, and I can't give away too many details, but I just remember sitting in the conversation as they were sharing their story with me, and they would tell me one thing and I'd be like, wow, that's really bad. I can't believe that happened to you. Are you okay? And then they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm fine. And then they'd move on to something else, and it'd be even worse than that thing. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's even worse. Like, I don't know how you were able to cope with that trauma on top of the other trauma. And then it just kept building from there. Like the next thing was worse and the thing after that was worse. And it really just tests how much like the human body can like handle. And like seeing that reflected in somebody sitting right across from you is really an eye-opening experience. Like, what would I do in that same situation? It would be really, really hard to say, because lucky for me, I don't have the trauma in my past, or that much trauma in my past. Everybody has a little bit, but I think being witness to all of the trauma that somebody has was definitely and has been eye-opening. Everybody has trauma, but to varying degrees. And some of the stuff that I hear from the clients is downright awful. Intimate partner violence, violence from caregivers, whether it's sexual, verbal, or physical, all three aspects. Working in like the sex trade, being young and watching like family members use substances or be taken to jail. So many different stories and so many different things. And sometimes there isn't really like even like not necessarily that much trauma. Sometimes it's just happenstance, right? Like addiction doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anybody, literally anybody. I can share one story because it's a personal story. So I can remember when I was younger, probably maybe 10, 11, I had somebody that was close to my family coming back and asking my father for money. And I can remember my father saying like, yeah, I can help out this time and not next time. And of course, being 10, I didn't really know what was going on. But as I got older, my parents would tell me more about the situation. And it turns out that this person was actually addicted to substances. They worked in the hospital setting. They were like a professional, and they just succumbed to addiction. And that is why they were asking for money from my parents. Unfortunately, this person did pass away later on from the complications of using substances. It wasn't a direct influence of, it wasn't like an opioid overdose situation, but definitely as a result. And like, again, this person was there for Christmases, was there for like family events and stuff like that. So a very respectable person, but addiction can happen to literally anybody. When we do presentations in the community with community partners, no matter what the size is, we always incorporate a piece about stigma and personal bias. Sometimes I have the opportunity to do like a thought experiment that was once done on me. Just somebody saying like a background story, you keeping your eyes closed and just thinking about what they're talking about. And in that story, they talk about all the different people that are in it. Once they're done, they ask you questions about like, did you think that this person was like indigenous, or did you think that this person was African American, or like did you think that this person had like a substance use disorder? And when it's done to you at the time, you really don't think about that. You really are just thinking about the story. And it's quite eye-opening to see that like those biases are built so much into our subconscious from like media and from like just the world we live in. So when we do our presentations and stuff, we definitely try to talk about the stigma that's directed at people who are using substances, and tell people that like, make sure you take a step back, make sure you look at yourself and try and address anything that might be leading to a personal bias. And a lot of time it's fear of the unknown that leads us to stigmatize, that leads us to discriminate against a group of people, right? And the best way to like counteract fear is to gain more knowledge. I've changed my behaviors dramatically from where I was about 5 to 10 years ago, as well as I've had a whole culture shift around seeing people who use substances and understanding the trauma that they've faced. So I count myself lucky, definitely count myself lucky for this positive change. But even in this current role that I'm in, it doesn't feel good if you get lied to. Like if you're trying to arrange care for somebody and they can't make an appointment, or they don't make an appointment, it's frustrating. So being able to take that step back and look at the whole picture and see, well, why is this person lying? How come this is happening? Am I trying to influence what I want in the situation instead of what they want? And I think that we have to remember that everybody is a unique individual, and not a one-size-fits-all solution, or not a silver bullet for the whole problem. A lot of the challenges that people have start in childhood, and there's like a term that we use, like adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs for short, along with like the social determinants of health. So that would be like your income level, your education level, your literacy rate, those kind of things. And they all play like a portion into like the person you become and like the level of healthcare or health you have as you get older. And I think a lot of people misunderstand it, because I think it's really important. If you start like with a firm base right in childhood and you have a lot of good supports in place, your likelihood for success as you move through life is increased exponentially. People who use substances, people who are underhoused, people who have like diagnosed and undiagnosed mental health conditions are humans. And I think that's often forgotten. They're somebody's brother, somebody's sister, somebody's aunt, somebody's mother or father. They have close connections to them. And as I said before, we're only experiencing them in this difficult chapter of their life, this difficult year of their life. They probably had a ton of history that we have no idea about. It's really unfair to judge them in that instant. And it's up to us to kind of shift our perspective and lend a hand where we're able to. The things that I think are important to have when working in harm reduction are definitely patience and compassion. As well, I would add to that perseverance, empathy, individualism, humanism, and general respect for everyone. I'm trying to achieve equitable care for all people, not just for ones that know how to navigate the healthcare system. I would say my most core human rights belief is to treat everybody with dignity, fairness, and justly.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for telling your story and for the work that you do in your community. We're going to end this episode with a few takeaways. Number 1, understanding intersectionality and discrimination helps us understand health better and provide better care. Secondly, human rights is about dignity, which is a value that Jeremy brings to work as a nurse in public health. One of the 10 tips from ONA's Anti-Racism and Anti-Oppression Toolkit is to identify and unpack your core beliefs and values about racism, equity, inclusion, and decolonization. Today's takeaways and tips are directly linked to ONA's ARAO action plan and to the strategic plan. You can read more about them at ona.org. If this episode brought anything up for you and you want to talk about your own mental health, check to see if you can access an employee assistance program through work, or find help through beyondsilence.ca, a mental health support tool developed by and for healthcare workers. This podcast is produced by Hannah Sung and Meg Shannon for ONA, the Ontario Nurses Association. Post-production is by Reza Daya. Original theme music is composed by James Hill for Project Whatever. Thank you to Kieran Maxwell, Patrick Mazambi, Lauren Snowball, to students James K. and Maya Aris, and to ONA leadership, including Provincial President Aaron Aris, CEO Andrea Kay, Vice President and Human Rights and Equity Portfolio Holder Karen Mackay-Eden, and Vice President Rachel Muir. If you like this episode, especially if you work in healthcare, share this with your people, and thank you for listening.